Alright, the marathon continues. And this was definitely a better season than the last one, because last season I kind of had like a mixed reaction as to how I felt about it, and I felt like the ending of it was in many ways like a transition, whereas this season did a much better job of wrapping up story arcs and laying the ground for newer ones that I think are going to be a lot more interesting, because, like with Karen, when she left at the end of last season, I'm like, we might totally be done with her, but we might not. I really don't know. But if she comes back, I really hope that it's not just her crying for forgiveness and doing that kind of thing. But to my surprise, that wasn't the case. Because I thought that if they're going to bring her back, they would bring her back almost immediately. They waited until the season was the majority of the way in before they brought her back. And the way that she behaved, you could tell that something had changed about her, where she had done a lot of thinking about what had happened, but also wasn't in that great of a position when she ended up sort of being forced to come back, even though you got the idea that the decision to come back really was hers. It didn't feel like a sob story, especially since how then she plots to get rid of, Hiram, which, oh man, that's a gut punch into Sheila, yeah. And then how they're actually able to still manage to continue the relationship between her and Lip, and how Lip knows that it's not a good relationship for him to be in, but nonetheless he just can't break away, because in a perfect world, yeah, he would be with Karen, but her behavior after she came back, he knows that there's something wrong with her, but yet he succumbs to it anyway. Seemed on the verge of breaking up, but doesn't want the last memory to be bad, and then he figures out what's going on with Mandy, because that's a love triangle that I actually wasn't complaining about, for once, because even though it is technically two girls fighting over the same guy, think about how many times that they interact. Incredibly few. It's them on separate occasions talking to the guy, one way more than the other, because Karen, she didn't really know about Mandy that much this season or last season, so yeah, I got no problem how this was handled as someone who usually ends up complaining about love triangles for some reason. And then, like with Mandy, it's not like she's perfect on this either, because originally she was Lip's rebound after he and Karen were having issues last season, even though something had begun to form in them. You could just tell by the way that they were interacting, and as I mentioned, at the beginning of season 2, he should have been like the fifth wheel when it was him, Ian, and Mandy. What? I was this close to saying Minnie. That was the problem, and I'm like, that's not right. But he should have been like the fifth wheel, and yet it didn't truly feel like that. You felt like that there was a meaningful purpose to him being there. Well, there you go. The feelings managed to develop, and you could tell that she definitely cared about him. Like, who on earth would go for the lengths of trying to figure out how to get into a prestigious college, get his information, because she definitely had to really think about how to do that, and then looking up essays on the internet, but then she mentions that she took bits and pieces from different speeches and threw it in there. Just how smart are you? Like, that takes a long time and a lot of patience. You wouldn't think that she has that kind of patience, but she clearly does. She's been through a tough existence, and somehow she manages to do something that is not good, but is a little admirable? Because her motives aren't perfect, and yet at the same time you can't blame her, like with many people in the show. Problematic, but can you blame them in these situations? You feel for it. So how they handled like all of that, especially with that last bit of interaction at the end of the season where Lip goes to Mandy and is like, I don't forgive you for what you did, but I did get into MIT, and it really did come down to you, because of course he could have just said F you to the MIT person that showed up at his house, which he technically did, but then he just throws in one other thing that makes the MIT guy go, So he just decides, spur of the moment, I'm going to pursue this a little bit further, and then he inspires Lip to actually talk to him, and... Huh? And yeah, a full ride at MIT? Like, you want to know how many thousands they're giving away in that? Just, whoa! It's crazy. And of course he doesn't know if he's going, but you can tell based on Mandy's expression that she knows that he's going to go, although I don't think it's going to work out, because, I mean, like, this show is all about keeping the family as one big unit, you know? Like, having a person be far away from the rest of them, that's tough to do, I know what you're thinking, but Carl and going to the camp, that was going to be 1 or 2 episodes max when he wasn't with the actual family. You just knew that he was going to get in trouble, and then go right back. That's exactly what happened. When the, child protection people show up, you're like, uh-oh, this is going to be rough for the family, but then you see just how casual every single one of them, except maybe Debbie and a bit of Fiona, are when they get into the car. They're just like, yeah, we'll be back in no time. And then you look at the environment that Lip and Ian are in, you would have thought, oh man, that's going to be tough for them to get out, but they're like, let's feel the system, exploit it, something's going to happen. And sure enough, 1 episode later, they're actually allowed to leave the entire time, as long as they report back at the end of the day. Huh? They worked the system. Voila. I wasn't really concerned at all after 1 episode. It wasn't long before they were back, yeah. Carl, I knew that he would bust out of there. It was just Debbie that was actually in trouble, but once she got away, even though in real life that wouldn't work for this show, you knew it would work just fine. And then speaking of Debbie and Carl, you would think that they used them less this season, but since they got rid of that insanely complicated love dynamic, I'm really glad that they ditched all those characters, though it was nice to see that little cameo from little Hank. But you notice how they interact with Frank and Fiona in a few instances, and you can tell that those kids, even though they know that Frank is a horrible person, nonetheless, the way that they care, it's touching, even though, of course, Debbie did attack Frank, but she had reason to. So they use them less, but the impact of how they use them, excellent. So I applaud that. Then Frank's gay bit, well, that's a couple of words taken out of context, especially since you don't know his true motives. But then how it goes into a storyline that is outrageous, but outrageously typical for the show. Nice way to keep Frank occupied and away for everyone else, instead of having to deal with odd bouts of love this time. So it was creative, although I hope they don't use anything like that again for next season. Oh yeah, Ian. I kind of glossed over him. The development with Mickey, so I don't ship the 2 of them. Like, I don't really ship Ian with anyone, honestly, partially because he's still a minor, and partially because, you know, it's a dysfunctional situation that he's in with Mickey, you know? But at the same time, it's interesting to me nonetheless. Like, I don't really know exactly how Mickey feels. I really can't place it, even though you can tell that he doesn't really mind the shenanigans with Ian. Although he was worried when he realized that Mandy knew at the end. Like, the way that she said it, she didn't have to. It's just clear that she knew, and he was bothered by it. His feelings for that Russian chick, yeah, you know that that's a sham. That's not gonna last. They don't care. Neither party does, but it's what the other people think that do matter. Yeah. But then that making Ian all of a sudden decide that he's basically going to skip his last year at high school because he's clearly not in the same year that Lip is, otherwise they would have jointly graduated, and then how he's impersonating Lip to get into the military. Well, one, that's grounds for multiple law violations, and then also, if Lip goes to MIT, eventually there's going to be an issue because what Ian did was that he took an old ID of Lip's, put his picture on there, but keeps all the information the same. Eventually someone's going to be able to figure out, hang on a second, we've got information from two different Philip Gallaghers with the exact same social security number. Because you need the social security number for both military and college. This is going to end up badly for one of, if not both of them. There is no way that that's not going to work. And also 4 years minimum, as he's telling either Mickey or Carl, pretty sure it was Mickey. Yeah, you're not going to keep the character away for that long. No. He is totally going back to them at worst midway next season. No. 100%. Like, this is not going to work like Glee does, where you have two different groups of characters that barely interact, although that's a whole different story. I could definitely rant forever about how that was a huge issue, but I'll save that for when I review the show, if I do. Right. So that's Ian. Sheila and Jody, well, the sex storyline, that's, again, typical of the show, but it also showed something that I was right about in my talking about Jody last season, in that Jody is actually an intelligent guy. He just wasn't using it last season. But even the bits where he and somebody are like talking in the bar early in this season, you got the idea, hang on, he's talking like a hell of a lot smarter now. What's up with that? And you see by the end, yeah, he's not totally where you'd like him to be, but it's close enough. You can tell he's using his minds, where he's managed to somehow work his way into Hiram's Asian side of the family, and that he's also taking Karen with him, and there's going to be this big dynamic later on that we're probably never going to know about, because yeah, with Karen in that condition that she is, there's no continuing that storyline. She's gone, where she has this odd situation where she's aware of what's happening all around her, and she knows that the people that she's around, she's familiar with them, because how she just goes Mandy Malkovich with no provocation from Lip about what Mandy's last name is. She remembers who Mandy is, but she's just unable to accept the fact that it was Mandy specifically that hit her. She knows that something happened to her, but yeah. So it's a weird situation where she still has the mind capability that she has, and yet in many ways she's just lost that ability to grip onto it, as if she's less than half her real age. Yeah, you can't really do anything more than that. So she's gone now, along with Jody, but you know that he's going to be fine, and she's eventually going to find some kind of balance. She's going to be dependent on people for the rest of her life, but can she, I think, recover enough of her intelligence to where she can learn stuff again? It's possible. It's possible. So, yeah. That handles that. But it was nice to see Sheila shed the reclusiveness that there was in Season 1, and also her inability to do some kind of action like there was for a decent amount of last season. Now, you know that she's just another character. And that's good. Kevin and Veronica, whew. I'm amazed that they were able to still kind of continue the remnants of what happened when Ethel left them and go to the idea of them trying to have a baby and getting that very interesting, being out of the box idea of getting Veronica's mother pregnant, and then how at the end you realize that it might just blow up in their faces, but then you realize that Veronica's mother wasn't sure about what was happening to her, and even then she was like, you made me feel wanted. You were giving me a purpose again. I didn't want to lose that. And then you see Veronica, who's still annoyed at her, but at the same time she's like, I believe you, and if I was in your position, would I have done that? I think so. And Kevin, who knows that he was kind of taken advantage of there, pretends to, be the fetus, and just goes, please stop fighting, okay? We get what we want anyway. Yeah, that's just amazing how they were able to do that storyline, and yet they still matter in the show, especially when Kevin and Lip are talking about how Mandy probably was responsible for Karen, and then he goes from listening but not really to, huh? Okay, you got my attention now, buddy. Nice. And then Fiona and Jimmy, yeah, because now he really is Jimmy. It's appropriate that just at the moment that maybe they had something going right in their favor, that it gets ruined in both ways, both with Jimmy's own personal decision making and then the fact that he got wound up with Estefani's father, because yeah, she was barely featured in the season, though if you watch the deleted scenes, there's actually a couple of them with her there. So that dynamic came out just enough that, yeah, Jimmy was neglectful. Estefani got almost deported, but you know that her father was able to pull enough strings to stop that. And then how he takes Jimmy away at the end, and although it's not explicitly revealed if he dies, my thinking is that he probably does. But then you've also got the dynamic with him and that driver guy, because at first the driver guy was just a pain in the butt, doing all kinds of bad things, but then you start sensing that something has changed, like how when the driver sees that a couple of bad things are happening to Jimmy, and Jimmy also exploited a slight weakness within the driver, it wasn't that big. It was just a very subtle thing, so subtle I can't even describe it. You just see that something has shifted between the two of them, especially when the driver pulls alongside them when Jimmy is interacting with Liam. And the way that he's handing the mail over, it isn't like, here's your mail, idiot. It's okay, here's this, that, and this. You can just sense that something has changed between them, where they're like, we've seen each other at our worst, so now we're going to actually do little things to help each other out here. We have an understanding, but one mistake from either of us, both in regards to each other and everything else, we both easily could end up being in trouble. But Jimmy was entirely neglectful of Estefani, whereas the driver was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. So he's in the clear, and then you saw Jimmy trying to appeal to the driver, let me have one last phone call, and he says no, but then off camera, he presumably gave the guy an ATM card and goes, here's the password, could you please give the money I've got in there to Fiona? And here's the thing, driver did not have to do that. He could have just pocketed the cash and done nothing. But then you see that he goes to Fiona's house, hands over the cash, and tells her Jimmy's parting words. He didn't have to do that. He chose to. Huh? That was a great scene. But it was nice to see that Fiona ends up writing him off, but comes to terms with her decision by the end of it. And it's also great that she might be able to start putting some more money on the table, but of course, something's going to happen that causes her to leave that job, either being treated badly at the job or family dynamics forced to take her away. There's no way she's going to stay at that job, but for a while at least she's going to be okay. Yeah. Just, whoa. Man, I guess I'm more into the show than I thought. All these reviews are taking up quite a bit of time, yeah. But like I said, I did consider making episode-by-episode reviews of the show, but I figured I'd be repeating myself too much. And I think I'm right about that, but I'm still talking about it more than I think I could. Wow. See you whenever.